Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the three faces of Foley, The Undertaker, and Mark Calaway. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special edition of the Squared Circle Psychobabble. I am your host, Ralph Valenti, and we are going to discuss the supposed retirement and the documentary, Undertaker: The Last Ride. The Undertaker is without a doubt one of the most iconic professional wrestlers of all time. Nobody is going to dispute that. I have to say, I've seen many documentaries, most of them put together by WWE, some of them put together by smaller organizations. I love seeing these types of documentaries because it really gives you an insight of who the person actually is. In this case, we got to actually see who Mark Calaway is. 30 years in the professional wrestling industry is a long time, especially considering some of the things that The Undertaker has been able to accomplish in his time in the WWE. You talk about WrestleMania. You talk about the streak. You talk about probably what he meant to SmackDown, and you talk about him being one of the most, if not the most, respected individuals in the locker room, according to many people who have done interviews, talking about The Undertaker and the type of guy he is and the type of respect he has earned in the industry and within WWE. From a personal experience, there's been, a handful of times where I've gotten to see The Undertaker perform. Two things that stick out to me from a more personal level. So I remember one time my brother and I, we were at a fan fest. The Undertaker, who was very much in character, which is something we'll discuss because it's obviously one of the more important things of why this documentary worked so well and why it was so important, why it was so special. As I got closer to The Undertaker at this point, 6 years old, 7 years old, not knowing that wrestling was predetermined, not knowing that this was actually a human being and thinking this was literally a demon that I was about to approach, I had somehow gotten the courage that when I got face-to-face with The Undertaker, all 50, 60, 70 pounds of me at that age, I don't know, I handed The Undertaker the picture that they give you to be autographed, and when he looked up at me, I had rolled my eyes in the back of the head exactly the way The Undertaker has been obviously come to be known to do when he's out and, doing a promo or something. He rolls his eyes in the back of his head. And The Undertaker, in his very demonic voice, deep, raspy, and very much in character, looked at me and said, "Very good." I thought that was one of the coolest things that had ever actually happened to me at that point. Found it very cool, especially considering that this is a guy that is so iconic in professional wrestling. That's got to be a unique story, at least for me. The other time, one of the classic matches that I've ever seen personally live, WrestleMania 29, his match against CM Punk, I was there for that. Just to kind of go over some of the things that are special to me about The Undertaker, because when you think back to how special this man was really for the professional wrestling industry, I'm sure many people have memories, whether it's from matches, getting to meet him out, but many people have not been able to actually see The Undertaker in this way, as Mark Calaway, as the guy behind the hat. That's what made this documentary so special. This is such an important documentary because it shows how important it is to protect your character. That is something that doesn't happen as often now. It's obviously much more difficult because when you think about this, there's social media, there's media, there's people that are following you around, you have fans everywhere. I can literally take my phone out, take a video of somebody out to eat at a restaurant, whether it's Mark Calaway, whether it's The Undertaker, whether it's Steve Austin, doesn't matter. I can take that video and I can upload it to a YouTube channel for the world to see. So it is very hard to maintain the character. Does that mean that it can't be done? Does it mean that you can't protect the character? No. I think that some people, obviously fans, are under the understanding that professional wrestling is predetermined and that they feel like they don't have to go to certain lengths to protect the character. Case in point, big angle at the end of AEW Dynamite, we had seen Chris Jericho in a pull-apart brawl against Mike Tyson. Henry Cejudo, which is obviously another UFC fighter who is involved in that whole little melee. Now, granted, he is from the UFC, so he's not necessarily involved with professional wrestling. Maybe he didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he had uploaded a video to his social media of Chris Jericho and Mike Tyson joking around, essentially exposing the business to a certain extent. Yes, we all know that it is predetermined, but this documentary really helps instill that it is so important to protect your character to a certain point, especially when it's a character like this. Undertaker even commented on this at the beginning of the documentary. He said that he knew he was going to go to great lengths to protect this character. First of all, I don't even know if he knew that he was going to be involved in the industry for that long, but he probably certainly didn't know that he was going to be filming a documentary about Mark Calaway and showing you who he really is in real life and showing you the man behind that character, The Undertaker. But obviously there are people within the industry who go to great lengths to protect their character because ultimately that's one of the most intriguing things about you, right? I mean, you look at Brock Lesnar, he's a badass in real life, and he's convinced you that you probably shouldn't approach him because he's a bad dude. He's probably not a person that you're just going to approach in like a Denny's or a Wendy's if you saw him in there, because he goes to great lengths to protect the man he is. There's no distinction between Brock Lesnar in WWE versus Brock Lesnar in real life. You can't tell the difference. Same could probably be said for MJF. MJF could be a dick as a character. Maybe he's a dick in real life. But the key is you don't know. But it just goes to show you, if you want to go to great lengths to protect the integrity of your character like The Undertaker did, it can mean something extremely special in a case like this, where now we've actually gotten to the point where we get to see Mark Calaway. 30 years later, we get to see the guy behind the hat, the guy behind the coat, the guy behind the Undertaker character, and I thought this was an amazing documentary that really got to show you that. I wish that we see a little bit more of that in professional wrestling. The other thing they touched on, we are so quick to blame Vince McMahon and the WWE for burying everybody, for doing all these big, bad, nasty things to all the people within the WWE and burying everybody. One of the things they touched on, it was AJ Styles who contacted The Undertaker wanting to work with him. If we go back to Super Showdown, many people, many wrestling fans were critical of the WWE. Vince McMahon, why are you putting over The Undertaker? Why are you putting The Undertaker over AJ Styles? The Undertaker is too old. Myself probably included in that conversation. What did we find out? It was AJ who wanted to work with The Undertaker. It was AJ who reached out to The Undertaker wanting to work with him. He wanted to work with him at WrestleMania. We know that the match, the short interaction at Super Showdown was a prelude to that. So that led in, that kind of pretty much set the table for the match that they were going to have at WrestleMania with the Boneyard Match. Doesn't mean AJ's buried. Look at AJ Styles now. Is AJ Styles fine? I would think so. He just had an amazing match against Daniel Bryan 2 weeks ago. He's the Intercontinental Champion. Mind you, there's also no shame in losing to The Undertaker, so I think we need to relax with blaming the Vince McMahons of the world for everything that happens in the WWE. Vince McMahon was obviously involved. Vince McMahon had to sign off on it. It's his company. He gets last say. But The Undertaker and AJ Styles both agreed that that moment at Super Showdown needed to happen that way in order to get to the point where AJ Styles would have his match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania. Which, again, after WrestleMania, people said the same thing. AJ Styles was buried. The Undertaker's older. This looks like it could be The Undertaker's swan song. Could ride off into the sunset, like he says. I think after 30 years, he's earned the right to go over a guy like AJ Styles. AJ Styles will be just fine, no matter what he decides to do. AJ Styles could decide to go to AEW tomorrow. People would be just as excited, even if he had lost 5 consecutive matches to The Undertaker. It would not make a damn difference, and everybody knows that. If you're sitting there saying to yourself, he lost The Undertaker 5 times in a row, I don't want to see AJ in AEW, you're wrong. You're lying to yourselves. Look at the Revival. Were they booked strong by WWE? No. Cody Rhodes? No. Many people find success outside of the WWE. There's always an opportunity to rebuild somebody unless you consistently drop the ball with someone. And they certainly have done that with more than one person. AJ Styles is not one of those people, especially when he's losing to a guy like The Undertaker. So I think that's one of the lessons we have to learn from this, especially with a documentary like this, as telling as it is. Let's stop blaming Vince for everything. We don't know everything that goes on in the WWE. We like to think we do. I mean, case in point, myself. I have this show. I do it with my brother. We have fun doing it, and a lot of times we use our opinion in an educated guess, but I don't know. I don't talk to Vince McMahon. I don't work for WWE. I don't have an in. I analyze the situation, and I give my opinion based on what I see, and I will say, I think this was a mistake. I don't think it was a good idea. I think they pushed the wrong person. I'll certainly do that. But to suggest that The Undertaker went over AJ Styles just because Vince McMahon decided to do it, I would have been wrong and a lot of people were wrong. So I think we have to take a step back and at least admit that, especially in a case like this where the documentary obviously revealed they were all in this together. They all knew what was going to happen. This is not the Montreal Screwjob 2.0. Another thing they touched on, I thought that was very telling and very revealing. So there was a point throughout the documentary where he is talking about the match that he had, he being The Undertaker, he had against Randy Orton. He had made Orton look good. Now, Orton was still relatively young. This is probably right around the time where he debuted. And he made Orton look strong, and Vince McMahon was upset with that. And I think The Undertaker said his response to Vince was, well, we're supposed to make the guy look good, right? We're supposed to make the guy. We're supposed to make him look special. A couple of months ago, there was a match where Alan Angels, I believe his name is, had a match against Kenny Omega. And there was some controversy surrounding this match because Alan Angels had a competitive match against a guy like Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega obviously is one of the best wrestlers in the world. Alan Angels, maybe he's got a bright future in professional wrestling. Right now, he's just another guy that's on the AEW roster. At that time, I don't even think he was signed. And he went out there and he had a competitive match with Kenny Omega. A lot of people were critical of that, myself included, at the time, because you have a guy that is unranked, that is not signed, having a competitive match against a guy like Kenny Omega. Do I have a problem with that? I don't have a problem with it unless they plan to do something with said individual. Case in point, Randy Orton. Randy Orton right now might be doing the best work of his career. He might be the best heel in professional wrestling, maybe only second to MJF, and in my opinion, this is the best work he's done in quite some time. I mean, he is at another level. He seems motivated. He's obviously using any of his experience to his advantage in this whole situation with Edge, and obviously we see what's going on with Christian. So I think that him going out there, meaning The Undertaker, going out there and having a competitive match with Orton, WWE and officials there obviously knew something was planned for Orton down the line. I mean, his last name is Orton. His father worked for the company. That doesn't mean he will be successful. We've seen other, second generation, third generation superstars who have flopped or haven't necessarily lived up to expectations. But with Orton, they knew something was different. They knew something was special. So I don't have a problem with a newcomer going out there and having a competitive match against an established star like The Undertaker or like a Kenny Omega, as long as you're going to do something with that talent. So I think that, if there's a lesson to be learned in all of this, exactly what The Undertaker said. And after being in the industry for 30 plus years, I think he has a clue about what the hell he's talking about. Yes, you want to take care of the guy. Yes, you want to make them look good. But to what extent? This really helped establish why those things are important, I think. In my opinion, if you're going to do something with that character, with that individual, I have no problem with it. They did it, obviously, with Cena. You saw it with 1-2-3 Kid back in the day. I think he was called the Lightning Kid at the time, going over Razor Ramon. So no issue with that, as long as you plan to do something. Alan Angels hasn't really done a whole hell of a lot. I think he's in the Dark Order since that match with Kenny Omega. It's not like they can't do anything with him, but it's also not like he was a big part of any of the Dynamite shows since that match. The big question, is this the end for The Undertaker? I honestly think he's got one more match in him, and here's why. After the match at WrestleMania, the Boneyard Match, which obviously was crazy successful, a lot of people were talking about that was the best match of the weekend from the 2 nights of WrestleMania. You've noticed that AJ Styles is obviously bothered by the fact that he lost to The Undertaker. They kind of touched on this a little bit a couple of times after WrestleMania. They obviously touched on it at Money in the Bank where he walked in that room and there was a picture, I think, of The Undertaker. So, yes, I think that there is one more match that is going to happen. One of the titles that has eluded The Undertaker throughout the entirety of his career is the Intercontinental Championship. Does he come back for one last ride, one last chance against AJ Styles? And ultimately, does AJ Styles retire The Undertaker? Certainly possible. Certainly something I'd be interested in. And then again, the patience, the fans nowadays, including myself, I think so many times we want to see the conclusion to the story that we forget the introduction, the body, and everything that leads up to that. Moments are made by the story that precedes it, because everything that comes before the conclusion has to tell the story, has to get the buy-in of the people, has to spark the interest, has to really established the momentum, getting to that point where, hey, Daniel Bryan has a good example, the Yes Movement. It was special because of the story before it. It was organic. You wanted to see it. Does that mean at this stage everybody wants to see AJ versus Undertaker? No, but I'll tell you this much. If it means AJ getting his win back over The Undertaker, so the people that said, oh, he was buried, and then you buried him again at WrestleMania, at least he gets that win back. At least he's solidified. Or this could be it. And if it is it, that's fine with me, because you know what? The tail end of his career, he certainly went through a lot. I mean, you look at all the things that he talked about in that documentary, the loss of his brother, obviously, and having to work through that, going to WrestleMania, not being able to be there with his niece, I believe he said. We forget so many times the sacrifice that all these professional wrestlers make to entertain us. And we're all so critical of them. The Undertaker. Who the hell are we to say, you're too old to do this? The only guy that should be able to tell The Undertaker he's too old to do this is another guy of equal stature within the WWE, maybe Vince McMahon, maybe a Triple H, maybe a Shawn Michaels. We're just fans, and we come on these shows, and we talk about it on Twitter all the time. We don't want to see The Undertaker. This guy's too old. This guy's pushed too strongly. Who the hell am I to tell The Undertaker you have to retire, you're too old? It's not for me to decide. A lot of times I think we forget all the sacrifices these individuals make for the industry, for us as the fans. And this documentary really made me take a step back and say, a lot of times maybe we are too critical of them because they do sacrifice so much. They're not with their families. They're out on the road. They're beat up. They're tired. They're run down. You know, there's situations like this, obviously, where The Undertaker didn't get to be there with his brother when he passed away. So those things, unfortunately, do happen, and those are the sacrifices that they do make. But as far as this documentary is concerned, all 5 parts, I thought it was amazing. I don't know if this is the end for The Undertaker, but I think that this documentary, however many years down the road, is something people can look back on and talk about how special it is, only because of the lengths The Undertaker went to protect the integrity of the man he was playing. There's Mark Calaway, and there's The Undertaker. And it took 30 plus years to see who Mark Calaway truly was. We may never get an individual in the professional wrestling industry who goes to the lengths that he went to protect the integrity of their character, like The Undertaker. 30 years of sacrifice. 30 years of sacrifice for the fans, for the WWE, for the industry. I can't envision a character like that coming around again, being as successful as he was. I mean, when you talk about the streak, the championships, the success on SmackDown, all of that stuff. So if you have not watched this documentary, take the time to go out and watch it. I think you will have a new appreciation for The Undertaker. I think that it will change maybe the way you view some of the WWE. So take the time, set the time aside, go watch this documentary. Well worth it. Let us know what you think in the comments. Again, my name is Ralph Valenti. Thank you for joining us on the Squared Circle Psychobabble.